Only one?
Only one.
Fuck. Spider is one of my favorite Cronenberg movies. She was really the godmother, I think, of the new wave in France. Une journée particulière. Doing the Lord of the Rings was like a film school. So I didn't know the big son of a bitch could act. A good idea can come from anyone, anytime. It's an interesting movie. It's not a great movie, and I won't talk about it. And then he bowed down to her, took her hand, and kissed her hand, looking into her eyes. And I thought my stepfather was going to kill him.
Just to start, what is your relationship with the physicality of movies, the DVDs, the VHS?
Well, when I first started acting, I was in New York, and I used to go and get VHS copies. I mean, the first time I saw La Passion de Jeanne d'Arc, I saw a bad version of it. It's probably 1982 in a movie theater, but I was amazed by this movie, so I went and found it. I got a VHS copy of this that I watched many times. Well, this is the original version. Around the same time that I first saw this, they thought that the original version of this movie had disappeared, but somebody found in a closet in a mental institution in Norway, I think it was 1981, they found the reels of film. I guess the director of this center many decades before had been a cinephile, and he had purchased this from somebody, because the original copy they thought had burned in UFA Studios in Berlin. I've seen this version many times. This is the original version, and it's quite a beautiful movie. This is a movie I saw when I had already decided I wanted to try acting, and I was amazed by the performance of Falconetti. That was the first thing that struck me. It was how incredibly moving her work was. And there were a lot of female performances that what inspired me to try acting, really, more than male performances in a way. You know, at the time when I was starting, there were movies like Sophie's Choice and, Meryl Streep, or Jessica Lange and Frances, but also older movies like this one, or movies with Barbara Stanwyck, even Westerns like 40 Guns, Sam Fuller movie, which is a wild movie. Has a lot of beautiful things in it. Barbara Stanwyck in The Lady Eve, Preston Sturges, Another movie I saw before I took the step of trying to be an actor was, that impressed me a lot, was, I don't know if you have that here. Autumn Sonata. And this was Ingrid Bergman's last movie that she ever did. She was not well, but the acting from her and from Liv Ullmann, who plays her daughter, and then the sister, played by Lena Newman, extraordinary performances. But especially this duo, this pair of women, it was just extraordinary what they did in this movie and what Bergman did. And even though in a way it's a portrait of a sort of a monster mother, also there's some understanding of her situation in this story. There's a difficult balance to achieve, but he did it. And there's a final confrontation in the scene that really impressed, I think, a lot of people. It certainly impressed me, where they say everything that they haven't said to each other, the mother and the daughter.
Du måste upptäcka att du bär på en skuld, du som alla andra. Varför skuld?
And it's all done in close-ups, back and forth. And the mother says something, the daughter says something. You never did this, you never said this, you never did this, you were never there for me, etc., etc. In a way, it reminded me a little bit, in a strange way, of this movie, of the use of close-ups for emotion. Really strong emotion from great performers. I mean, I love my father, but he was absent a lot because my parents separated, and I identified a little bit with the absence of the mother, the tension that was caused in the relationship because of that, because of my own experience. And even when I first started acting, my mother was much more into me being an actor and thought it was okay to try, and was patient with the fact that I couldn't make a living for many years. I had to do other jobs. And he was less so. He didn't understand why you would keep trying to do something year after year when you're bartending and you're waiting tables, you're driving trucks, you're selling ice cream on the street or flowers or anything to pay the rent, because you're obviously not going to make a living doing this. And it could have been right, but I got lucky and then eventually started making a living, you know. Great movie.
If we stay in this section, you've picked a Tarkovsky one.
It's another great movie. I think I first saw it on television, and then I saw it in movie theater, but this was once I was already an actor and had been on some sets and understood more. I mean, before being an actor, I was a photographer and was writing for years before that. And the photography in this is beautiful, and the structure of the story, the way he works with memory in this story was striking to me.
Мам, а в каком году от нас отец ушел? В 36-м или 37-м?
Ну, во-первых, в 35-м. А потом зачем тебе все это?
I watched it again a few times before doing directing my first movie, Falling. There was something about, because that movie has a lot to do with memory, the absence of memory, the loss of memory, and how things change. Even when you watch these movies, I mean, the first time I saw this movie or any movie, then you see it 10 years later and the movie's different. And you see it 10 years later, you know, I think movies that you remember movies from your childhood, you remember movies from your adolescence, as an adult, young adult, and middle-aged, if you get there. And in my case, movies I saw before participating in movie storytelling, and movies as I begin to do that, and then movies now, later on, when I know how movies are made more. And this was one that, because of the way it treats memory and the fallibility of memory and the evolution of memory.
Есть ведь совесть, память.
А при чем тут память?
Obviously, the movies don't change as you see them again. It's you. It's not like I was trying to imitate it. I'm trying to reference. I know some directors do this a lot. They're proud of it and they talk about it. This is an homage to this actor or this scene or this movie. I just assume that everything I've done, including coming here to visit this amazing place, will stay with me and will maybe influence me somewhere, somehow. I don't have to analyze it or conceptualize. Anyway.
If we move a little further, you have picked a movie that, because we have made more than 100 interviews in this place, but I think that especially that one, Crónica of the Niño Solo, I think I've never heard of it.
You never have? Okay. I recommend this movie. I don't know. It's very difficult to find this movie. Crónica de un Niño Solo is an Argentine movie by Leonardo Fabio. It was his first full-length movie, I think. And he became a legendary director in Argentina in the 1960s and 70s. My mother, who was the first person to take me to the movies, took me to see this movie. I think about it now, I can't believe she did that. I wasn't very old. I was maybe 6, 7 years old. And but I mean, she took me to see other movies when I was 3, 4, you know. And she liked to talk about story. And this was one, I don't know why she took me to this, but I was extremely impacted. This is a story about a boy who's in an orphanage, and he eventually escapes the orphanage. And what impacted me when I saw it as a boy the first time was that it was very sad, and I really wanted him to get out of there. And then once he got out, and there was some hopefulness, I wanted him to find a family or someone who wanted him to be with him. Then when I saw it recently, years later, now an adult, now someone who works in the movies and has directed movies, I was really impressed by what he does with the photography. The movie is very much in the tradition of Italian neorealism, you know. And the way it starts, I think the first shot is like a top shot. It shows these kids in this building and these stairs and stuff. And but the whole beginning part is these rigid lines in terms of the way things are shot. And there are some circular movements that make you feel constrained, like you're trapped, which makes sense in an orphanage. It's sort of dark, and these circular motions of the camera really were effective. And then when he escapes, you see a different, more depth of field. It's more open, it's brighter, it's more hopeful, there's more light, etc. But then things start to go really bad again in the story, and he returns to this kind of circular motions and constraining. And I was impressed by it technically. It was pretty amazing. It was a landmark movie for Argentina, and I don't know how well known it is in Europe, but I recommend it. This is another great movie. This is a movie, 1984. It was at Cannes. That's right, because Paco Raval and Alfredo Landa, I think they won together Best Actor prize at Cannes that year. They gave a joint, I think that's right. But in any case, this is a movie about a brutal, feudal time, Franco Spain, recent 20th century history. And it's kind of a period that some people who are maybe extremely nationalist now don't want to think about too much. It's uncomfortable, but it's very truthful to a certain part of the world and a certain kind of socio-political situation. But it's beautifully told, and the acting is extraordinary. It's about a period that's, for most people in Spain, is not, that they don't forget and they don't forgive. It's a very important movie. It's a great movie. I've seen it again recently. Fortunately, I've seen it on the big screen as well. It's an extraordinary, beautiful, very moving story. Yeah. Los Santos Inocentes. What else do you have? That's a great movie too.
Vedrà, 2, 3. Ma che stiamo facendo? La rumba!
I remember watching, this is sometime during the pandemic, when the lockdown, like a lot of people, you guys probably did this, you watched lots of movies, more than usual even. You guys probably watched lots of movies all the time, but maybe you watched even more during the pandemic. I did. So I thought, well, I'm going to try to find movies that I remember seeing a long time ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and see if ones that I thought were great then, and see if what I think now, yeah. Some of them I thought were terrible, and I'm like, why did I like them? I don't want to name them, and I don't want to be negative, but there are some. This was one that I liked even more. Una giornata particolare, a special day, I think it's called in English. Une journée particulière, Ettore Scola, Marcello Mastroianni, Sofia Loren. Amazing story. It takes place on a day where it's in Italy during the war. It's early on. Hitler is visiting Rome to see Mussolini.
L'urbe ha preparato per il Führer un addobbo nel quale il pasto si unisce alla più maestosa semplicità. Fascio littorio alla croce uncinata e intrecciano nel vento i colori delle due nazioni.
Mussolini famously was wanting to show off, we are a big, powerful country too. And so he had the tanks going by and the airplanes flying by. But supposedly he had the tanks go around and come around again to make it look like he had lots of tanks and the planes, the same thing. Germany had lots, but Italy didn't have so much. But anyway, he was showing off. And it's a family of many children. Sofia Loren is a housewife, and her husband is a member of the black shirts, fascist. And so he obliges all the kids to go with him to this parade, and she stays home alone, doing the laundry and doing housewife stuff. It's beautifully shot. There's some really great choices in terms of lenses and the way things are done. It's a building that has a really big inner courtyard, and across this courtyard, through a window, she sees a man, and it's Mastroianni. And he's someone who she ends up meeting him, seeing him during the day. I won't ruin it for you. And he's someone who's in trouble with the fascists. Because I shouldn't tell you why. Anyway, and a very unusual, unexpected friendship is struck up between them, and it's called a special day. A special day because Hitler's visiting, but a special day because of what happens to her. Great. I recommend it. Do you have VHS also?
VHS, I think they have some, yeah.
I still have a old TV that has this double DVD VHS.
But do you still watch VHS?
I do.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I have a pretty good collection. I don't watch them too much because if once they break, that's it.
It's done.
A phantom thread.
It's you who brought me here.
When the hell did this happen? Who are you? Do you have a gun? You here to kill me? Do you have a gun?
Stop it!
Where's your gun?
Stop it!
And one of the reasons that I hope that she would play our Vivienne Lecoudi in the movie I'm presenting now, Jusqu'au bout du monde. So where are you from? Vivienne Lecoudi.
It's a very long story.
Vicky is extraordinary. There are some people who are great on stage, extraordinary actors, and then you put them in front of the camera, but there's no magic, And she's one of those people that has this undefinable, mysterious quality. She can act without words. You know, there's a interior life that comes through. It's almost like her feelings and her thoughts come through her skin, you know. It seems like, and through her eyes. I hoped that she would want to play this part, you know, that I wrote. And when she said yes, I knew we had a chance to make a movie that was really special, you know, about this, with a very strong woman at the center. It's a Western, but it has a woman as the main character. Very free, stubborn woman. Yeah, I'm glad she did that. She was extraordinary in this movie. It's really, really great. This is a movie that maybe not so many people have seen. I don't know. Do you know this movie?
Oh, Josh.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for meeting me.
I know the director, of course, but I know that one.
Peter Bogdanovich, known for, you know, The Last Picture Show and What's Up, Doc, and other movies. This is a movie that was probably pretty hard to make. It was made in Singapore. It's called Saint Jack. Oh no, this is a Spanish version. Saint Jack, el rey de Singapur. Le roi de Singapur. It's Singapore before it got changed and became ultra-modern, and it was still the waterfront. There was lots of prostitution. It was just a more dirty, kind of like Times Square before it changed in New York City, you know, where it was more like dangerous and everything. And he's Ben Gazzara, known for his work, especially with John Cassavetes. He plays Jack, who's a kind of a mid-level, he's not a very important pimp. He's sort of a nice guy, he helps people out, he really knows the town, but he has rival pimps and gangsters who are trying to get him all the time, and he's always looking out for them and hiding. And it's set in the early 70s, and there's a later section in the movie where, after an ellipsis, where you see a lot of American servicemen. They would go there, like they would go to other places in Asia when they had time off from fighting in Vietnam. And they go and they would come to, he would provide girls for them. And it's sort of a nasty movie. And at the time it was forbidden in Singapore, and they wouldn't have been allowed. It was based on a book that's known in Singapore. And it doesn't make Singapore look like paradise on earth. So the government there was like, it was forbidden. So they went and they came up with a different title and a different synopsis of, they said, this is what we're shooting. So they shot this whole movie and got out of there, and then they put it together. I think it's a very interesting movie. In some ways it's dated, but it's a very accurate picture of a particular time. And the central performance by Ben Gazzara is really remarkable. I think there's a certain looseness to him, a certain empathy he has with people that's striking. And when he really becomes a pimp in a more negative sense, in a darker way, is when he starts to, someone from the CIA is there and wants him to incriminate, I don't want to ruin it, but a politician. And so he participates in that. He's about to sell his soul, but then something happens, and you'll see. Very good movie. I recommend this movie. Peter Bogdanovich was somebody, during the pandemic, is when my first movie came out, and I was frustrated because apart from Spain, couldn't show it anywhere, and because countries were locked down. And so I sent the movie, links of it, to different directors. He was one of them. And he responded to it. He really liked it. And then we started talking on the phone a lot. We couldn't go anywhere, especially where I was. And we ended up, I talked about, I wish I had taped this. I should have. But it was about all his movies. We talked about Howard Hawks and John Ford and all kinds of things. And Preston Sturges, I think we talked about, and Lubitsch, and, any number of things. And yeah, that was a great thing. One of the good things about the pandemic. Like seeing Una Giornata Particolare and other movies. What else? I did pick Spider. It's Cronenberg. It's a great movie, but I really want to point this one out. I'll be quick. The Long Day Closes by Terence Davies, who died recently, I think last year.
Deliver me from the misfortune of falling into mortal sin.
English director. This is a very poetic, sad story, but it's beautifully done. It's the point of view of an 11-year-old boy, which is kind of autobiographical, in Liverpool in the mid-1950s. It's beautiful, the way he uses images, references to movies, to music, things that interest this boy like they interested him. And it's really poetic and beautifully done. The use of sound is also great, and images. It's a lot of things that he shows you, and there's a sense of longing in this movie that's very special. Anyway, I think he's great. Spider is one of my favorite Cronenberg movies.
You bastard! I'll cut your fucking heart out with a trowel
Don't talk to me about nonchalance.
I think it's 2001, 2002. This was the movie he made just before I got to know him, before we did, because we shot, this was 2002, and then 2004 we made History of Violence. But I was amazed by this movie. It's a very difficult movie. It's a man who comes out of an institution and he has lots of hallucinations, you know. The way David was able to film this with Peter Suschitzky, his cinematographer, the use of sound, image, the way he got into the head of a person who's suffering from this ailment was extraordinary. And I think it's my favorite Ralph Fiennes performance also. Gabriel Byrne is also quite good. Miranda Richardson is great in it. I recommend it. Spider. What else you have?
You picked a movie, Wanda?
Ah, Wanda. Probably nobody knows this movie.
Sun's gone down.
This was by Barbara Loden, this is the only movie she made. Again, this is about a very particular kind of woman, this story. It's a sad story and kind of a really gritty story about this woman who's, you might consider her lost, or you might consider her searching, I guess. I don't want to ruin it, but good movie. Unusual, difficult to find.
You can do it.
I can.
You can do it.
I can.
You can. You can.
I can't.
It's great that you guys have a copy.
And I picked a movie just on the right of that one. I don't know if you would like know that one.
Oh, yeah, Heavenly Creatures.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson.
Why could not Mother die? Dozens of people are dying all the time, thousands. So why not Mother?
Yeah, I saw this obviously before we shot The Lord of the Rings, but this movie impressed me a lot, and especially Kate Winslet, she's great in this movie. This was made at a time, I mean, obviously, Jeff Murphy was another director. He had made a movie that was important in New Zealand. You know, he was one of the few directors in the late 70s, early 80s, and then along comes Peter Jackson. Obviously, Jane Campion was the most well-known, although really as a movie person, her education was in Australia, but she references New Zealand, and obviously the piano is set there. But apart from Jane Campion, there wasn't a huge movie business in industry of making movies in New Zealand before The Lord of the Rings. And before The Lord of the Rings, this movie was made, which was extraordinarily well-made independent movie. It's a beautiful story. I recommend it. If you haven't seen Créatures Célestes, Heavenly Creatures, very good one.
Oh, I'm the matron's favourite patient, and she showed me her special stitch. I love the colour. It's for you.
And I had a question, because you mentioned David Cronenberg, you mentioned Peter Jackson. Were they directors that helped you in a way of making your own movies as a director? Like, did you watch them work and get inspired by the way they worked? Well,
for everybody, not just Peter Jackson, but everything that Peter Jackson's team did, the experience of doing the Lord of the Rings was like a film school, like an incredible film school. And you could take advantage as much as you wanted. I took a lot of advantage. I would go in everywhere to look at how they were building Rivendell and how they were building Helm's Deep and everything, how they did the clothes and the props and the weapons. And it was just an amazing, he single-handedly created this giant film industry in New Zealand that didn't really exist before. And like Jeff Murphy was one of the people that came and did second unit for him. It was an incredible undertaking. But yeah, I've been lucky. I've worked for a lot of really good directors, women and men, Jane Campion, Anna Peterberg, but directors who are as different as, say, Ron Howard and David Cronenberg, but both of them, as different as they are as people and as their movies are, there's two things that they do extremely well as anybody, which is to prepare a shoot and to remain open at all times to the suggestions, the ideas of other people, without becoming impatient, without shutting down, you know, because they're practical, intelligent people who understand that a good idea can come from anyone, anytime, you know, anywhere. Monty Walsh. This is a Western I'd recommend a lot. I know you're probably running out of time. This is a great movie with Jean Moreau and Jack Palance and Lee Marvin in the main role. Lee Marvin and Jack Palance are buddies in this. And this is a Western that's unusually faithful in terms of the vocabulary, the language, the way it's shot. I like Sergio Leone movies, but to me that's like opera compared to theater. You know, Monty Walsh is in the tradition of the classic Western where the photography is simple, elegant, and the horsemanship is authentic. The language is authentic. It's a beautiful movie.
Maybe we can go to the French section.
This is a great movie. From one of the, I mean, now she's getting credit, but initially, this movie and before that, La Pointe Courte, she was really the godmother, I think, of the new wave in France. Belle en pure perte. Until recently, she wasn't really given that kind of credit. You know, it was all about the men. And I think she laid down a challenge to those guys, which they followed and became much more famous than she did. There's many things that I like about this movie, but one of the things which then became kind of her signature in all the movies she made after that was her attention to ordinary objects. In this movie, it's a day, well, it's between 5 and 7, with this woman who has gotten some bad news in the beginning. She's got a terminal illness.
Ah, mais tout ne va pas bien. Il y a un bouleversement. C'est votre maladie que vous prenez trop à cœur.
J'en étais sûre. C'est grave, n'est-ce pas?
And then she goes through a day in Paris, walking around and doing things, and the attention of the filmmaker to ordinary objects and encounters and even conversations for what is not an ordinary day for this woman. She's got this bad news. The way she films these things, the way the attention to detail is really beautiful. And ever since this movie, I think that Agnès Varda continued to pay attention to the small things, the ordinary things, ordinary decency, normal, everyday courage. You know, that's something that seemed to be her focus, you know. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful movie. Wow. It's an interesting movie. It's not a great movie. And I won't talk about it. La Talente. There's a movie I like.
Attention, un peu de poudre de perlimpinpin, hop, il est toujours là, monsieur. Me voilà. Attention, hop, il est parti.
I had a VHS of this. I have a DVD of it. I've seen it in a cinema, fortunately. Jean Viggo. Yeah, it's a beautifully romantic story. Really interesting shots. Some great performances, you know. Yeah, Michel Simon is really good in this movie as well.
Pas mauvais seulement. Quand on me cherche, on me trouve.
Ah, ça va, Père Jean.
Oh, ben.
And these lovers, it's just on and off. It's a relationship. There's a lot of tension. It doesn't work. It works. It doesn't work. It works. And just the choice of locations and being on the river and being on this boat was extraordinary. This one says, well, they really want you to see this. They say, maybe the greatest movie ever made. I don't know if that's true, but...
Maybe at the time.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe so. But it is one of the great ones. And he was it's a shame that he died so young. Like, who knows what he would have done. This one's special.
I think we have time for one last more. So maybe on the classics Hollywood, you can pick one.
I talk too much. Only one?
Only one.
Fuck. I'm going to name 3 in order to talk about one. I'll just name them.
Okay. It works.
Lonely Are the Brave, Kirk Douglas.
Hi.
Strongly recommend this. This came out the same year as John Ford's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Well, I know those law books mean a lot to you, but not out here. Out here, a man settles his own problems.
When people talk about John Ford, they always talk about The Searchers, but I think Liberty Valance is better. I also prefer Stagecoach, but that's another story. And this came out the same year. It's a modern Western, but it's great, 1962. Red River is one of my favorite movies.
Don Diego, tell him that all the land north of that river is mine.
Howard Hawks, favorite Westerns, and I featured this in the background on a little TV in Falling, and it's there was a dispute between father and son in that story, a scene, and in the background there's an argument between, they're not blood relations, but Montgomery Clift's first movie, you know, he was a theater actor from New York, and I just imagine him coming, I've read a little bit about this, when he arrives there in 1947, he arrives, John Wayne is the king of Westerns. And here comes this New York actor who on top of it was homosexual, you know, and here he comes and he's going to be toe-to-toe with John Wayne. And he is. He's so good in it that I feel like he forced John Wayne to do better than usual. In fact, John Ford visited, I think, the set, or in any case, when he saw John Wayne acting in this movie, he said to Howard Hawks, "I didn't know the big son of a bitch could act." Is what he said to him, you know. And I think this is, next to Stagecoach, this is John Wayne's best performance. So I cheated a little bit. I talked too much. And the third one and last one, well, these are both movies, David Lean movies, written by Robert Bolt, great screenwriter. These are both movies I saw with my mother when I was very young. This one I was 4.
He was my friend.
That?
Yes, that.
This one I was probably 6, I guess. Dr. Zhivago.
Pasha, I can't deal with this.
They both feature Omar Sharif. My mother liked Omar Sharif a lot. I remember when I saw this movie, it was in a big movie theater in Buenos Aires, and in the intermission, l'entracte, we were out, you know, having a Coca-Cola or something, and my mother, even then, was talking about story. You know, I think in another life she would have been a screenwriter or something, maybe a director. And she said, "So what do you think is going to happen in the second part of the story?" And I was 4, and I was already riding horses, and I was very impressed by these big, strange-looking horses called camels. And I said, "Well, I think Lawrence is much better at riding the camels than the other Englishmen, so I think he's going to be okay, and he's probably going to win." That's what I said. Years later, I realized that there's a lot of inaccuracies in the story about the real T.E. Lawrence. Historically, it's not an accurate movie, but there's some beautiful things in it. One last thing about this, about Omar Sharif, and I'll finish with this, also to do with my mother, so it's appropriate, because she got me into movies. I did a movie called Hidalgo. In Morocco, we shot it, and he's in this movie, Omar Sharif. And he would spend the day, he didn't eat any food during the day. This was his diet, nothing. Might have a glass of water. And then in the evening, back at the hotel, he would have a 2 or 3 scotch, whiskey, and then a dinner, and he wanted people to come and sit with dinner, and he would invite people, and a lot of wine and telling stories and like that. And so I took the opportunity. I told him, you know, my mother really idolized you, and I remember seeing your movies, and so I took the opportunity, like I did with Bogdanovich, to ask him everything I could think of. What was it like shooting Lawrence of Arabia in Morocco and Spain, and what did he remember about his relationship with Peter O'Toole? A great story, some of which I can't repeat because they were pretty. Anyway, yeah, in another venue, without a camera. So I told him all this, and then when the premiere of Hidalgo happened in Los Angeles, I think it was at the El Capitan movie theater on Hollywood Boulevard, I had decided, with the permission of the horse master and the production, I said, I'm going to arrive on the red carpet on the horse, which I did. And the problem was it was raining, and the horse master said, please be careful, I don't want you to slide under a bus or something, because I came down Hollywood Boulevard and then up on the sidewalk and down and it was raining, but I'm wearing like a suit and tie, and I'm riding this horse. And I ride the red carpet, and the journalists and the photographers are like, what the fuck? And I ride up, and there's the microphones, and I turn the horse to the microphones, and then they ask the first question. I said, I think you should ask the horse, he knows a lot more about it than I do. And they're like, but you have to talk. I said, I'm kidding. And so then I get off the horse, and they had a special place with some hay where he could be during the movie screening, and then people could look at the horse if they wanted to. It was publicity stunt, but it was fun, and I think the horse had fun too. So I'm standing there, and my mother was visiting from the northeast of the United States. She came to visit us a week, and I invited her to the premiere with my stepfather. And she's standing there, and then I see Omar Sharif is arriving, you know, with his entourage and like that. And he looks at me, and he looks at my mother, and he says, oh, like that's my mother, the one who loves you, you know. And so she walked up to her and people were sort of parting, right? And he walked up to her very solemnly like this, you know, looking right at her. And my stepfather is getting nervous, like, well, who is this man? What are you doing? He doesn't know who it was, you know, because he's, you know, white hair and a beard. And he looked deeply into my mother's eyes with those incredible eyes he has. And then he bowed down to her, took her hand, and kissed her hand, looking into her eyes. And I thought my stepfather was going to kill him. And she got completely red. And then he kissed her hand. He said, you must be Grace. And she said she couldn't even talk. But he was very happy. So sometimes life has a way of coming around and doing something special. It was a great opportunity. Anyway, I love being in here. We don't have to have cameras. Next time I'll come and we can talk about movies.
With pleasure.
C'était un plaisir. Merci beaucoup.
Konbini!
Well, I could spend weeks in here.
There are more than 50,000 movies over there.
Wow, 50,000.